This chapter is another important part in this entire playlist as we are going to understand the role of file formats while loading the JSON data into Snowflake tables or querying the data for internal or external stages. And it has some interesting parameter that can help a Snowflake data engineer to bring efficiencies and cost effectiveness, especially when dealing with a large and complex JSON data files. This chapter will cover following topics: JSON file format and compression supported by Snowflake, how data loading perform with different file compressions, file format parameters like strip outer array, default date and time format, and does it really work while loading the data into a variant column, and can it save downstream processing time if conversion is done during data loading via file formats. Does trim space param works with JSON file format? And a couple of other features and limitation with respect to JSON file format. During the hands-on exercise, we will also talk about tips and tricks and other limitations. We will also touch upon query profile screen and table copy history features as applicable. This is a complete hands-on chapter, so stay tuned until the end of this video. And if you want to practice them all along or later, I would also share the script and data file location. Welcome back to my channel Data Engineering Simplified, and to this Handling JSON Data in Snowflake playlist for true data professionals like you. This is a complete playlist to cover JSON handling in Snowflake. Link for all the chapters can be found in the description section below or clicked above in the information icon. So let's start with chapter 7, Role of File Format in JSON Data Processing. Let's quickly discuss how the JSON file format object looks like. File formats are first-class objects in Snowflake. They can be created, dropped, altered using DML statement like any other object. The SQL construct looks very simple and similar to CSV file format. However, its parameters are slightly different and more aligned with JSON file structure. If you look into the line number 1, 2 and 3, they are self-explanatory and they are must. So giving the file format name like my JSON file format and type parameter value is JSON. Line number 4 is a file compression parameter, and if not specified, it is considered as auto, and Snowflake will detect it automatically during copy command, and we will explore it later. We will discuss the supported compression in the later part of this video. And then we have other parameters like strip null values, ignore UTF-8 errors, time and date formats, allow duplicate. These parameters are optional, and if not specified during the creation of a file format, Snowflake automatically assign a default value to them. Some of them will be discussed in detail in this video, and some of them will be covered in the next video as they need specific attention and a use case. We will start the strip outer array parameter first and understand how this works and why Snowflake has given this parameter. We would continue to use the employee domain as it is easy to understand, and most of the use cases and technical scenarios can be understood easily using this domain. We have already discussed about JSON file classification in our chapter 5 and have practiced how to process these different kind of JSON files, including the processing complexity and compute cost. Now let's understand first what is multi-line JSON and how do they look like. There are JSON file which are also known as new line delimiter JSON file, or that is called NDJSON files. If we take this example of employee JSON, many employee objects are part of employee's root element. On the other side, we have all the employee objects as a part of array using bracket notation. Both are valid JSON. If you would like to see the standard employee JSON file, usually they look like this. On the other hand, the new line delimiter JSON file looks like this. What if you remove the outer array from the new line delimiter JSON file and try to process them? Do you think it will be processed by Snowflake? We will try if such files need a pre-processing, or it can be copied and loaded directly without any change, and each employee will be extracted without any issue through the Snowflake copy command. However, on JSON editor, when I tried, this file is identified as an invalid JSON object. Obviously, as per the JSON notation, this is not a valid JSON notation because it has to be part of a bracket notation or a curly braces notation. Again, if you have not seen my first chapter where I have explained about the JSON grammar, I would request you to go watch that chapter. So let's start with strip outer array parameter in our Snowsite web UI. Here I am in my Snowsite web UI and this is my first worksheet. I have already changed my context. First, I am going to create a file format called my JSON file format where my type value is JSON, compression is auto. I could have also ignored that. And another important parameter where I have added strip outer array where I am just considering default value. Let's create this file format. It is created successfully. Now I am going to create a table called empJSON1 which has a field called JSON data of variant type. Now I am going to put a JSON file which is called NDJSON underscore empJSON and let's see how this JSON file looks like on our JSON visualizer. So if you look into this JSON, this is a valid JSON. It is an array of employee object and I have total 3 employees available. Each of the employee objects are having ID, name, designation and so on. And if you look into the visualization, there is no root element. Each of this employee object is a part of an array list. Let's go to SnowSQL and load this JSON into our internal stage. So this is my put command where I am placing this NDJSON underscore emp.json into the user stage location. Auto compress equals to false and parallel equals to 2. This got loaded, compression is false, that's why the data loaded as is. I'm going to run the list command in my user stage location and let's see whether this file exists or not. Yes, my file exists. Now let's run the copy command and load this JSON data into emp underscore 1 table. I'm passing the name of the file and the file format is my JSON ff where my strip outer array equals to false. So let's see what does it copy. So it says 1 record loaded. And here what I noticed that the entire JSON object is inserted as a single row. However, there are 3 employee objects inside this JSON and if I have to load the individual employee as a single row, then strip outer array is a parameter which I have to set as a true. Let's do that. Alternatively, since it is in stage, without copying the data, I can also run a select statement and this is how my select statement looks like. The same file format, let's see what result does it generate. So here, since file format is parsing the entire JSON as a single object, now before I make any changes to the file format, let's describe the file format. And if I scroll down, strip outer array value is a false, which I have to make it true. So I am running this alter statement and making sure this strip outer array value is set to true. So changes are applied. Now let's truncate the data. Now I'm going to re-execute the copy command and this time I'm making sure the force equals to true. Again, if you have not seen the different parameter for the copy command, please watch this entire data loading playlist, which will give you a lot more insight how the data has to be loaded and how the different parameter really affect your copy command. So with that one single parameter, what I noticed that the one single JSON file where strip outer array value is true is now loading the 3 records. And if I really run the select statement on the stage location, it should generate the 3 different rows. Yes, it gave me 3 different employees. Let's run the select statement on this table. It also gave me the 3 rows. So there is a possibility that you may get a big JSON file and that JSON file might encapsulate multiple individual objects. In that case, each of those individual objects should be loaded as a single row. And if that is the case, you have to make sure that strip outer array value is set to true. We also discussed if I remove the bracket notation which is encapsulating all your employee object, will it work or not? First, we will try to see in our visualizer whether it identify as a valid JSON or not, and then we will load the data and try to process it. So if I remove this bracket, it immediately identify this JSON as an invalid JSON. Let me copy, paste and load the JSON for you. I am loading this employee without bracket NDJSON.json into user stage location. So it got loaded successfully. Let's run the list command and see whether my file is loaded successfully into the stage location or not. Yes, the file is available. Now let's truncate the table before I load the new set of data. And now I am going to run the copy command, and in this copy command I have specified the invalid JSON and my file format is my.jsonff. Let's run it. Again, it loaded the data successfully, and let's see the data first. Looks good. I can also try to execute the select statement on the internal stage. Looks good. So it is very clear that whether you have a outer bracket notation or you do not have outer bracket notation, in either case, Snowflake is able to process the data. So this is how you can use this parameter and make sure that you reduce your pre-processing by enabling this parameter equals to true, and you will save a lot of compute and processing power. For if you try to see the copy history for employee underscore JSON underscore one table, I have performed 3 different copy operations, and all the copy operations are recorded here. First, only one row is parsed. Second, in a single file, 3 rows are parsed. And again on a third one, 3 rows are parsed, and all the files are recorded here. So even though you have a single JSON file can have a lot of objects like employee in this example, and they will be treated as individual rows for your table. When you come to the copy history, you will get the data loading numbers as the actual number of individual elements within your new line delimiter JSON file. Now let's understand how the strip null values work. This is my second worksheet, and I have already changed my context. First, I am going to create another file format called JSON file format 2. Here my type is JSON, compression is auto, strip outer array equals to true, which we have seen earlier. And I added another parameter called strip null values, and by default it is a false, and I have specified false here. So let's create this file format. Let's describe it quickly. Here on line number 13, strip null values equals to false, default is also false. Now let's create another table called emp JSON2, and it also has one column called JSON data of variant data type. I'm going to put a file called sparse emp JSON, and we have seen in our previous chapter how the sparse JSON looks like. And again, if you have not seen that chapter, I would request you to go and watch that chapter. The link is given in the information icon. So this is how my sparse JSON looks like. It is little complex JSON. If you look into this line number 28, the previous experience is null because sparse JSONs are having a lot of null or empty values. Here if you see, these are empty values, these are not null. If I shrink this particular employee, I have a second employee where this person has previous experience. So let me quickly load this file. My file is loaded successfully. Let's try to list this. So my file is available. I'm going to run the copy command, and I'm using this JSON file format too. Let's run the copy command. So one row loaded, and let's run the select statement. So I see degree equals to null is appearing, and for the first employee, previous value is null also appearing. Looks good, and this is expected behavior. Now if I go and check my table size, let's go back to our table view. When I see my table view, the data looks like this, perfectly fine, and the copy history also shows one data set is loaded. And if you look into the size of the table, it is 8.0 KB. Okay, now I'm going to change the parameter from false to true, and let's see how does it behave? Let's describe. So if you look into the 13th row, it becomes true. So I truncated the data. I do not have any data set. Now I am going to rerun my copy command, and this time I'm using force just to make sure that the data is forcefully loaded. So again, I have only one employee data set. So let's run the select statement. And this time, if you see that one of the null value, what we had it is not appearing. Let me go back to the editor. So degree is equals to null here. However, I am not getting degree. And when I go to the first employee, and if you see here, I do not have the previous experience equals to null. So this is the power of strip null values. And let's go back and check whether the table size has any impact or not. So if I look into the data set, I have only one record available. You can see I got two files loaded. The size is also looking same because we have just two small element. However, when we are going to process hundreds and thousands and millions of rows and you are processing a sparse JSON file, you would see a significant difference in your data size. Though storage cost is very cheap in Snowflake, however, if you can save few dollar or few $100 by having this parameter enabled, it will show you a big difference in your overall cost of Snowflake data platform. Let's try to evaluate if strip null parameter really has a performance impact or a storage impact. For that, I have already created a JSON data file which has quite a number of records. So this is my third worksheet. I have already changed my context. I'm going to create a JSON file called JSON file format with nulls and another file format called JSON file format without null. Only difference, if you notice, it is in line number 11 where I'm keeping the strip null values equals to false. In the sense, null will be treated as a null, and on another file format I am keeping strip null values equals to true, so it will ignore all the null values and that data will not be inserted. So let me quickly create these file formats. Now let's validate whether this parameter is reflecting correctly or not. Strip null values for a first one is false, expected. Strip null values is true for a second file format, looks good. Now I am going to create two tables just to represent and load the data through the respective file formats. So both the tables are created. I have already loaded this big file. Let me list it quickly. So I have total 100K records available, and right now there is a gzip applied. Since compression is auto, Snowflake will automatically identify and try to load the data. Now I am going to run the copy command. So this is my JSON FF with null and the table is employee JSON with null. So I can see 100K rows loaded. So this took roughly 3.1 second. Compilation is 95 millisecond and external file is 98 millisecond and execution is 2.9 second. So total 3.1 second. Now let's run the select statement. I can see 100K rows listed here. Now run the next copy command. I'm using the file format which says strip null equals to true and it is a second table. So copy command look exactly same. So this is even slightly faster because I am actually loading the same data set. So it might have used some warehouse cache. Let's execute this select statement. So I can see 100K records. I am in my data tab and let's see first JSON with null values and what is the size of the table. If you see, size of the table is 4.7 MB. When I try to see the table emp underscore JSON underscore without nulls, the total size is 4.5 MB, which is slightly less than the 4.7 MB. So if you are using strip null values equals to true, you may end up saving some amount of storage. And for the large volume of JSON file, it will be a significant cost saving. Now I'm in my new worksheet, and here we will try to understand how other parameters like date format, time stamp format and trim space, whether they really work or they do not work when it comes to the data loading through JSON files. So this is a new file format which I'm going to create called JSON FF other, and I have, other than strip outer array and strip null values, I have also given the parameters for date format, timestamp format and trim spaces. So it is created successfully. Now let's describe it. You can notice in line number 3, 4 and 5 and 7, I have my date properties given as DDMM YYYY. Time format is HS24 MISS, and timestamp format is also DDMMYY followed by the timestamp format, and my trim space equals to true. If you look into this JSON file, it has three employees, employee 1, employee 2 and employee 3. If you pay attention to line number 9 to line number 11, and similarly we have 19 to 21 and the last employee 29 to 31. In this I have given joining date time and total experience. These two values are not wrapped in the double quote, and we have seen in our first chapter JSON parser does not recognize the date and timestamp. So in the JSON editor this is marked as invalid JSON. For the last employee, everything is wrapped in a double quote and the total experience are having the spaces before and after the value. And we are going to see whether those four parameters is going to help us loading the data correctly or not. Now I'm going to create this table. Now let's put this file quickly. So I am in my SnowSQL and the file name is emp.json with date, and it is being placed in user stage location. So the file is copied successfully. And I can see the file is available here. Let's run the select statement. I do not have any data. Now I am going to run the copy command, loading the data into emp.json other from this date JSON file, and the file format is JSON other. So it says that it is partially loaded, only one row loaded, and there are two rows ended with error. And if you look into this, it clearly says that it is not able to parse the literal JSON. And if I run the select statement and try to validate whether trim space equals to true really worked or not, but it looks like it has not worked. So this parameter is really not for the data copying purpose. However, when you are unloading the data, in that case, this parameters really make sense. So for the loading data, you don't have to specify this parameter. Even if you specify these parameters, this will not be very effective while loading the data into the Snowflake table. Here, I'm in my new worksheet called compression, and we are trying to understand how this compression parameter works, and if I specify none, auto, gzip, deflate, raw, how they are going to translate the JSON parsing and the data loading. Let's change the value to none. It means that it is not expecting any compression, and I'm going to create a file format called JSON file format compression none. Let me create that. Now let's describe and see how the parameter looks like. And if you see here, my compression is right now none, default value is auto. I'm going to create a table called emp.json compression none. We already have tried this JSON file earlier, and let's try to list it. This is a large file having 100k employee, and the file compression is gzip. What happens when we try to load this compressed JSON file where my file format is having a none compression? Let's see. It had worked appropriately when we have used gzip as a JSON. However, in this case, let's say what happens. So it says that it has loaded partially. So I can really run the validate command and see what has gone wrong. Since we have loaded the compressed JSON file into a non-compressed file format, that's how it has ended in error. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to quickly change the compression to gzip and let's see whether the same file gets loaded or not. My compression is gzip here. So I have made the changes. Let's run this copy command. So nothing has changed except the file compression is taking a parameter called gzip. So I can see my data loaded successfully without having any issue. And this is the role of a compression. If you are using a compressed file, you are having a right parameter for the compression. Let's quickly try deflate bz2 and let's see how do they work. So let's try to use the different file format called bz2 or deflate. I'm going to create two different file formats. On the first one, my compression is bz2 and the second one, my compression is deflate. I'm going to create two different tables to load the data. So my emp bz2 and emp deflate both are there. Let's quickly place the file in the user stage and this is the command. So this is my first file. So this got loaded successfully. This is my second file. This also got loaded successfully. They are same file. There is a big difference between the size of the file when it is in the source as well as it in the target. I can see on the line number 5 and 6, I can see bz2 and deflate, both the files are available with file extension bin. They do not have extension called JSON. Now I'm going to run this copy command and it will try to load deploys. Let's see. So it has parsed one single row, looks good. Let's run the select statement first. So I can see the data is available here and let me run the second copy command. So I can see my JSON file here. Let's go back and quickly check the data tab. So for bz2, the file size is 6.5 KB, pretty small. And for emp deflate is also 6.5 MB. Since it is just a 1 or 2 employee record, it's not really giving any big difference. And since it is the same employee data, on surface, you would not be able to see the big difference. So we have seen pretty much all the parameters which are very, very important for JSON file processing. And whether it is strip outer array, strip null values, we have seen date format, timestamp, and trim spaces. None of them work when it comes to the JSON file format, especially when you're running a copy command. Now the next, we would like to understand how the allow duplicate works and what is the importance of this parameters when it comes to the JSON data file. So continue to watch this space and also explore my other playlist which covers wide variety of topics. Thank you for watching, keep learning and keep growing.